So I'm not negative on it. I really hope it succeeds. I said publicly, when Elon came out and said, "Oh, we're going to cut $2 trillion," I knew that was just a joke number. And to his credit, right, even before that Trump has taken office, he's walked that number back.
Do you think the $2 trillion is a realistic number now that you're looking more closely at it?
We'll try for $2 trillion. I think that's like the best case outcome.
Right. Elon and Trump have this similarity in the way that they both sort of overpromise a lot of things, and even if they don't deliver on everything they're promising, if they hit 75% of it or 50% of it, that's huge, right? Elon does this with all of his companies. He'll constantly give out these boastful expectations that he doesn't really hit, but he still hits a lot. And yes, it may seem disappointing to some, but it's still very meaningful, the end result. So to me, I don't think they're going to be able to cut $2 trillion. I think there's plenty they can do to work on this. But ultimately, if you're going to really tackle our debt and deficits, the way you need to do it is you need to do it through the Congress. You need to do it through reforms of the entitlement programs. That is the single biggest way you can do it. Now, I'm skeptical whether anything happens through Congress. I don't think they're going to waste the political capital to try to reform, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, these sort of bigger expenditures or military spending. I don't think that gets through. But what I want to bring up that I think is critical for anybody who's being hostile towards Trump as he's intervening here is that, one of the big jobs of the president is to sort of set the message and set the agenda and to prioritize where the country's going. So, even if you can't achieve everything you're setting out to do, the fact that they're talking about it and raising it as a subject of conversation is meaningful. It's a signaling channel that produces, I think, some result. And that's how we need to get back to that. I mean, the president, in many ways, he has a role, or he or she has a role, just to try to message to the country where we need to be, what our aspirations are, what the goal of America is, where we're moving forward. It's kind of like any other CEO or a leader of a sports team, right? They have to sort of set expectations and try to move toward those expectations. Now, why I think DOGE is important is because I do think there's waste and fraud and abuse and things in the government that they need to eliminate. However, we have to be realistic about what it's going to be. But what I thought was really interesting, I commented on this, is that did you see this issue with the Hollywood ambassadors that he appointed, like Sylvester
Mel Gibson, all that stuff? Yeah,
people are laughing about that and ridiculing it. I think the idea is brilliant. I really do. And the reason is because arts and entertainment are so vibrant and important for our culture. And when you get back into trying to create that culture, I think that influences and it permeates through the zeitgeist of society. They start to think and be more hopeful and more optimistic. And the crucial thing we need to confront, I think there's just this apathy. I don't know if you sense this, but I sense a lot of apathy among younger people and Gen Xers and other people that have been shut out. And people need to believe in something again. That's really important.
100%. I would honestly contest, Joe. Apathy is why we're here. I feel, not only do I feel it, I think there's been decades of apathy and just indifference. And I think that's why we are here, and malaise that has created this situation we're in. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it is brilliant. What do you think about, Trump, again, he is inaugurated here in a few days, hasn't even taken office yet. We've got people resigning left and right. Trudeau, people all over the place. Greenland, Mexico, in the Amazon cart, Canada. What's happening here? Is Powell? What's the Powell future as well? So I know there's a couple of things in there, but
to me, that's one of the biggest stories that's going to come, because we're entering into an environment where one of two things is going to happen. Either inflation is just going to trend lower to target, and sort of this immaculate disinflation, which I'm skeptical of. I don't think it's just going to slow down to 2% and hover there. I think because of a lot of structural issues that were not present prior to COVID, I think inflation's stickier. It doesn't mean you're going back to a surge to 8% or 7%, which is not my view, not my base case. But it can stay closer to 3 than it can to 2. And the primary reason is because of housing and structural issues with the housing market and people locked in at low rates and, no recession that's creating forced sellers to bring prices down. You've got issues with housing that I think are going to, they're going to last. They're going to linger for quite a while. So because of that, and you see housing makes up, I don't know about you, but it makes up the bulk of a lot of people's expenses. If you tie in real estate, insurance, shelter costs in general, it definitely is massive for people's budgets. So because of that, you can expect, the official government statistics of CPI to remain closer to 3. I think. I don't think they're just going to immaculately disinflate. And in that environment, like, what does the Fed do? The Fed has indicated that they believe they're slightly restrictive. Now, what that means is, in Fed speak, is that they think the neutral rate, which is a rate that is neither accommodative, it's nor incentivizing growth, nor restrictive, is somewhat below where we're currently at on the Fed funds rate. So that, give or take a couple cuts, maybe 50 basis point cut, you're basically at the neutral rate. If Powell is right on that, and inflation stays near 3%, okay, you can expect him to. I think he's going to hold pat and not be aggressively cutting. Now, if the economy deteriorates, that's a different story. But the reason I bring this up is because I think Trump is anchored to very low interest rates, because that's where, most people are familiar with. They're familiar with interest rates, 3%, 4% for real estate, and they're anchored to that. And if there's pressure between him and Powell, my view is, and I've said this publicly, that I don't believe Powell is you're going to have to drag him out of the Eccles building. You're going to have to literally send in, the Marines to get him, because I don't think he's leaving. He said publicly numerous times that the president doesn't have the authority to fire me. He was asked during one of the FOMCs last year that, if the president asked you to step down, would you? And he said no. And then there's this follow-up question, and he, emphasized it. I felt like he was ready to pound his fist. He says, not permitted under the law. That's the quote. It's not permitted under the law for the president to fire me. One thing I know about Donald Trump is when you tell Donald Trump you cannot do something, that almost is like poking the bear. It's like it's incentivizing him to come after you and say, you want to bet? You want to bet I can't do this? And then you get this interesting dynamic where, if we read a headline, you're gone, you're fired, his classic line from The Apprentice, Jerome Powell, you're fired. What happens in that scenario? Well, I'll tell you what happens. Powell's going to say, no, I'm not, because my Fed lawyers say that I'm still the Fed chair. That could create absolute chaos in the system.
That'd be chaos. Yeah.
Yeah, because it would have to be resolved by courts.
Right.
Court would have to say, can the president do this? Can the president fire? And you'd have actors in the government just blatantly disobeying the Federal Reserve. And, the Federal Reserve is a really interesting structure. People say it's part of the government, but it's really not. It's technically like a quasi-governmental
discovery period during that.
Yeah, if you go look on the Fed's website, I always thought this was fascinating. If you go on the Fed's website, the Fed itself refers to it as a quasi-governmental entity. I don't know what that is. I think that is so kind of interesting. It's created by an act of Congress. There is the Federal Reserve Act that creates the Federal Reserve Act. So, it was created by the government, but it views itself, I think, as separate and distinct from the executive branch or the legislative branch, it's just weird. And I don't think that people understand and appreciate that. I think most people, if you ask regular guys on the street, they'll say, oh, Jerome Powell, if they know who he is, they'll say, oh, he's part of the government, right? No, not really.
So the SBR, what are your thoughts on this going forward? Is it, a day one thing? Is it, first 6 months, effects of it? What's your take on what's going on here?
Okay. So my base case is that I think they shuffle around, reallocate some Bitcoin that they're currently holding into a reserve, and that they propose and basically, kick to Congress the idea of acquiring additional Bitcoin. It's very easy to sort of cash the check that he wrote to Bitcoiners saying yeah, I'm in support of an SBR. I just want the bill passed through Congress, and Senator Lummis and others just get it through. And then what we know happens is a lot of things die in Congress. It's an old politician's trick, right? They can be in favor of something knowing it will never happen by just saying, I want them to do it. I don't believe that they're going to go out on a limb, and I could be wrong, right? But I don't believe, based on everything I've read and heard, they're going to go out on a limb and via executive order attempt to acquire additional Bitcoin. We'll see. I do believe you're going to hear something fairly quickly as soon as he takes office about the SBR and his intentions. So I guess we'll know next week.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. It feels like an easy win to get Bitcoiners off your back to a degree. It's free Ross, right? That's something right there.
I think that's going to happen for for sure.
Yeah. It sounds like it is, right? Like the rumblings, like it just sounds like it will, which would be amazing. So that's one huge step. What do you think going forward? And this is kind of playing off that. What do you think they do over the next year, maybe the year or two with, is it capital gains? Like, what do you foresee them doing? Obviously, it's a very crypto friendly administration. Obviously, what do you see them attacking when it comes to crypto to deregulate or take things away to make it easier for people to operate within that system?
If you want the answer to that question right there and you like that spicy clip, check it out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. But if you want the full interview in its entirety, all the spicy clips put together, and you're not going to want to miss it, believe me, then check that out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. Do it.